Right, so the hierarchy of racism and the racist endeavour that is the Labour Party under Keir Starmer just continues on ad nauseum, as yet another Labour MP becomes embroiled in a racism row. But this one truly has to be seen to be believed. An explanation as to why he hasn't been removed as a candidate for this vile, rude attack upon Muslim constituents, insulting them and berating them inside their own mosque. The sense of entitlement is stupefying. It really has to be seen to be believed, this one. So watch this.
Shut up and listen, please. Give me the respect. I give you the respect. Just listen. No. You don't read anything. The problem with people are that they're ignorant. The problem is that people are ignorant. The problem with people are that they are ignorant. The problem with it, even in the house of God, you're ignorant, and that's the problem. You are doing what you're doing is wrong. And what we don't want to do is in order to look at what we've done. Again, the big problem with our community is illiteracy, because they're not able to read what's in front of them.
Right, so that was the former MP. He will hopefully stay that way given that conduct, but now of course Labour candidate, since we have no MPs right now, for Birmingham Perry Barr Khalid Mahmood, himself the first Muslim elected to Parliament in England, attacking fellow Muslims in their own mosque. Right now, you can imagine a great many Muslim communities are anything but happy with Starmer's Labour. But instead of meeting that head on, especially in an area he absolutely should know full well is as multicultural and multi-faith as Birmingham is, he's been their MP for long enough. The ire over Starmer's comments over Bangladesh, the party's position on Gaza and its support for Israel ongoing, Labour's reputation amongst ethnic minority communities, especially right now, is mud. Yet instead of dealing with that, taking that head on, answering the questions put to him, he simply told those whose voices he is meant to be appealing for, whose votes he wants, to shut up and listen to him. That their problem is that too many can't read, that they are illiterate, in response to demands that he explained the racism in the Labour Party, the racism aimed at their community, and rather than answer them, he claims they can't read, that they're illiterate in angry, venomous denials of that being the truth. Remember, Mahmood is himself Muslim here, but has built up a bit of a reputation, it must be said, for not standing up for Muslim issues. And the organisation The Muslim Vote, a recently formed collective who seek to better educate Muslim communities politically to not let their vote be taken for granted, have taken Mahmood to task himself, demonstrating very much that they are a political movement and not a religious one, so we can all pay attention to what they produce and what they have to say. And what they have produced in relation to Mahmood very much does ask that question. Does Khalid Mahmood really stand up for Muslim issues? The answer very much seems to be no. On Palestine, for example, Mahmood has not been critical of Starmer for his stance regarding Israel and Gaza. For example, we've all seen this piece of footage plenty of times by now, haven't we?
I'm very clear. Israel must have that, does have that right to defend herself, and Hamas bears responsibility.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. It is an ongoing situation. Obviously, everything should be done within international law, but I don't want to step away from the sort of core principles that Israel has a right to defend herself and Hamas bears responsibility for these terrorist acts. And I would call on all responsible states, particularly Middle East responsible states, to call this out for what it is, and to stand with the world in condemning, utterly condemning, these actions by Hamas.
Well, you'd imagine a Muslim MP worth their salt would have a thing or two to say about that, wouldn't you? I dare say some of the people in that mosque would have done. But Mahmood is quoted as saying on that matter of Starmer's shocking apparent approval of Israeli war crimes, the crime of collective punishment, which, as a human rights lawyer, he should know better over, that he did not think the conflict should be a resigning issue. Starmer consented to Israel committing war crimes as having the right to do that. He has never apologised. He never apologises for anything, which is why I make no apologies for repeatedly using the footage in my content. He owes an apology for that, but Starmer consistently never says sorry for anything he has ever said or ever done. Back to Mahmood, though, who, despite being Muslim himself, has inexplicable ties to anti-Muslim groups known for spreading Islamophobic rhetoric. He has served as a political council member for the Henry Jackson Society, for example, a right-wing think tank founded by the vehemently Islamophobic Douglas Murray, who has a track record of aggressively attacking Islam and portraying Muslims as a threat to Europe. Why would any Muslim have anything to do with such a body? It isn't the only one, though. He's also a senior fellow at Policy Exchange, which was co-founded by Tory MP Michael Gove, the man behind the so-called Trojan Horse affair, where Muslim communities in Birmingham, Mahmood's own patch, not Gove's, were smeared due to a conspiracy theory being spread around that Islamist beliefs were going to be forcibly imposed on local schools, and Islamification of them, if you like, false claims as they were. Islamophobic in nature, they absolutely were. Mahmood himself was involved in the spin promoting this conspiracy theory, though. One example given by the Muslim Vote is that Mahmood claimed that figures like Tahir Alam, who was the chair of the Park View Education Trust, had been plotting to overthrow Birmingham schools for years, and that Birmingham City Council did not dare challenge such conduct for fear of being seen as Islamophobic. The Trojan Horse conspiracy theory has done major damage to Muslim communities in Birmingham, and Mr. Mahmood played a key role. And yet Mahmood associates himself with Gove still at Policy Exchange, and of course Keir Starmer has kept him as a Labour candidate, one of the high-quality ones that he always speaks about, obviously. At another Policy Exchange event, he attacked women who choose to wear the hijab, claiming that depictions of women wearing it intimidate other women who choose not to. I wonder if he's ever asked his fellow Labour MP Apsana Begum as to whether she intimidates anyone with her hijab, or any of the non-hijab wearing MPs as to whether Apsana intimidates them. He has also said he thinks the hijab sexualises women and is oppressive. Further begging questions of Mahmood's support for his fellow Muslims and constituents is his support for the counter-terrorism prevent strategy, when the evidence against this by human rights groups, civil society bodies, other MPs, even the United Nations itself, has been that Prevent has massively failed to prevent terrorism at all, and instead has functionally been a mechanism by which to overwhelmingly discriminate against Muslims, and the evidence for this is indeed overwhelming. One example given in a report by the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Beliefs on behalf of the United Nations spoke of the expansion of Prevent in 2015 by placing a statutory duty upon schools to look out for and report students deemed to be being radicalised. Here are some of the key findings from that report. A. That the Prevent duty was leaving students fearful of exercising their rights to freedom of expression and belief. B. That the Prevent duty risked being counterproductive by driving children to discuss issues related to terrorism, religion and identity outside the classroom and online, where simplistic narratives are promoted and go unchallenged. C. That some of the key assumptions underpinning Prevent may be flawed, namely that a person holding non-violent extremist views is a reliable precursor of future participation in terrorism. D. That the key indicators of non-violent extremism on which the Prevent duty is itself predicated are themselves overly broad and vague, being defined in loose terms, opposition to British values. E. That those implementing the positive duty to identify extremist views had no background in counter-terrorism work or policy, and received at best no more than a few hours training delivered by video. F. That the effect of this strategy amounted to a systematic breach of children's human rights in a school setting, including the right to education, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, the right to privacy, freedom from discrimination, and fundamental concern for the child's best interests. That is just one aspect of a much greater, deeply flawed government strategy, but notably the effect it had on children. Mahmood, in a harkening back to that performance in the mosque, has supported Prevent and called for critics to bring forward workable solutions or keep quiet about it. He really is a charmer, isn't he? Another example of Mahmood allegedly excusing Islamophobic conduct concerned the suspension of then Labour member and Sky News host Trevor Phillips, who was suspended and placed under investigation under Jeremy Corbyn's tenure as leader for Labour, proclaiming that British Muslims were a nation within a nation and how few of them wore Remembrance Day poppies. Where other Muslim MPs were highly critical of the comments made by Mahmood, such as Labour's Naz Shah or Tory peer Saeed Avarsi, Mahmood defended him, saying the claims of Islamophobia against Phillips were so outlandish as to bring disrepute upon all involved in making them. Starmer, of course, reinstated Phillips' membership, no questions asked, no punishment or censure given. And then, of course, in 2002, if we go back all the way to then, he was one of those MPs who voted, deciding there was no need for UN Security Council support ahead of going to war in Iraq. At the actual vote in 2003 as to whether to go to war in Iraq, Mahmood was absent. but he has never condemned the action and has consistently voted against investigations into the legality of the Iraq War. Despite being a Muslim himself, there are ample examples that he's not much of a friend to Muslim communities. And when he can speak to fellow Muslims in a mosque like dirt, like he did there, then perhaps he's been an MP for too damn long. Almost 1 in 3 voters in his constituency are Muslim, but like his fellow Muslim colleague in Birmingham, Shabana Mahmood, no relation as far as I'm aware, her seat being Birmingham Ladywood, and indeed other Labour MPs in Birmingham as well, like Liam Byrne and Jess Phillips, the party is in big trouble electorally because of Labour's horrendous stance on Israel and Gaza, and the abuse it keeps heaping down upon Muslims and Muslim voters, and such as recent comments on Bangladesh, just to add to that. The Muslim vote are backing an independent candidate called Ayub Khan, a local councillor and barrister, who actually lives locally too, because Mahmood lives in London and has apparently done so for the last 20 years. Meanwhile, if you thought I'd reached the extent of Khalid Mahmood and Keir Starmer's awfulness, how about the story of the Jewish woman who successfully sued Mahmood for unfair dismissal after reporting abuse in his office that she was a victim of, and then Starmer later blocked her as a Labour candidate but kept Mahmood as one? Yeah, watch this video recommendation here for that story, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.